Hey nerds, this is going to be a review and breakdown of X-Men 97. This is the continuation of the original X-Men series from the 90s, starting now. Welcome to the Nerd Social. I am Colin.
And I'm David.
This is a continuation of the 90s X-Men cartoons that we love and enjoy. It's been the rage on the internet so far. The synopsis that was provided by Disney was that Marvel Animation's X-Men 97 revisits the iconic era of the 1990s as the X-Men, a band of mutants who use their uncanny gifts to protect a world that hates and fears them, are challenged like never before, forced to face a dangerous and unexpected new future. So, David, what do you think of X Men 97? I've been anticipating this for a couple of years. It was like number one on my list.
When I first saw the trailer, I was like, thought it was one of those fan art kind of trailers and everything. But when I found out that it's real, I was very surprised, thinking like, are they really doing this? And it brings up back a lot of memories that I feel like I'm back being 13 years old when I watched the series. So after watching the first two episodes, I'm like, wow, I'm really curious on what direction they're gonna take in this one. But I really enjoyed it.
That's good. So, I think that for me, it was definitely again, nostalgia trip, but there was definitely some jarring moments as well for me. Some of the voices actors are much older, like Cal Dodd, who voices Wolverine. And then there was a couple of other voice actors. The voice actor who played Cyclops actually has since passed away. And so it was very interesting to see that it was a very good facsimile to the old Cyclops voice. And then there were other voices that were very similar to the 90s X-Men as well. But there was some jarring moments, and also the animation itself is definitely a little bit jarring. The intro is something that a lot of people remember with the theme song. It was definitely a trip back in time in some ways. And also, it's just that at times it just threw me off because you're expecting a facsimile of the 90s show, and they brushed it up, cleaned it up, and made it so much more appealing now. And then even if you watch the old shows on Disney Plus, you can see that the aspect ratio is not the same. You can also see that there's some jankiness here and there with the animation, but this is just flawless animation. The colors are bright. It's just so amazing overall experience. I posted this on my social media, was that it really pushed the story forward. The material that we've had before in the past X-Men shows, it really made it into something that is hopefully really new and fresh. Even though the product is almost 25 years old, it's still very amazing to me how well they're able to do all aspects, the animation, the storylines, the character building, all of that. So I really am enjoying it very much in that way. David, so what do you think in terms of rating you would get for the first two episodes?
I would say I would give it a 9, which is a movie marathon
Mm-hmm.
for both episodes.
Okay. So for me, I think that episode one kind of dragged a little bit. It took me out of the story. Episode one was really an 8 for me. But then when I watched the second episode, it was definitely a 10. Wow, that was just so amazing. There were so many plot twists, and it was an allegory to a lot of things that are happening right now in our world. So overall, I think that will give me an average of 9 as well, movie marathon. Anything else you want to point out before we get into spoiler territory?
Let's dive in.
Okay. So, if you like our conversation so far, please like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Spoilers ahead. So, we have a couple of screenshots online. So, we're just going to go back to the beginning of the first episode where you can see that they were facing a very old enemy, the Friends of Humanity. So, they were definitely a thorn in the X-Men side, and really displays a lot of the bigotry and a lot of the intolerance of that universe. It is very interesting how X-Men is an allegory to present day and also to social issues that were existent back in the 90s, but also right now. The Friends of Humanity had sentinel weapons. And so Bishop here, who's new to the team, and also Storm, is facing off against these new weapons. David, what do you think of the beginning of this episode here?
The good thing I like about this episode, it jumped right into the story of what happened. Because the story takes place within 1 year after Charles Xavier supposedly died
Mm-hmm.
from the series finale back in 1997. The Friends of Humanity captured a mutant there,
Mm-hmm.
which which you will find out later on.
Hmm.
And an X-Men showed up to not only rescue but also discover about the Sentinels. So that's the big whole plot of this episode.
Yeah, and then that was definitely the mystery part of it. And you can see here, this was the first image of Jubilee. And so Jubilee was like the young person in the original series. She has definitely grown up a bit in this series, a little bit more experienced, a little bit more wise, definitely in terms of her dialogue, the mentorship of our main protagonist in the first episode, who was Roberto da Costa, the person that's finding himself in a lot of ways. So that's interesting to see that dynamic flipped, because we remember back with Jubilee, with the very first episode of the X-Men, was fighting against the Sentinels, and so the X-Men were able to rescue her from the mall. She also mentions that in this episode, so it was really interesting to have that callback there. There was definitely some figuring out as to why is the Sentinel weapons that are existing, even though in the original series it was already presumed destroyed. So Cyclops was able to go visit Gyrick, and we find out that he was the person responsible for Charles Xavier's assassination. And so Gyrick was able to provide them with information through Cerebro. There was a pretty cool thing with Jean Grey going into his head, trying to figure out where is Master Mold, because obviously there's some Sentinels that are out there that the X-Men don't know about. We now go on the X-Jet. We see Wolverine there for the first time. And so you can see here, it's very different from the original series in terms of the animation. So much more detailed, the color pops. And it's just so interesting. David, what do you think of the first experience of Wolverine?
It's fun to hear Cal Dodd back to Wolverine again, especially when he says the word bub
Mm-hmm.
on there. So I was like, okay, he still got it. I was like, really, oh my God, he said the line right there, and it's nice to see him again, one of the original ones in there. Even though, like you mentioned before, that the original voice of Cyclops passed away, unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
is now replaced by Ray Chase. So I didn't notice it was a new actor until you mentioned it, though. This new voice that takes over sounds just like the original version. I was very impressed about it, that he got the pitch of the voice. So,
Exactly. And also, right before the scene, he did a superhero landing with his optic blast. And I thought that was pretty creative. Like, he was doing the whole Captain America, I'm jumping out without a parachute. I saw online that there was like, oh, this is how they did Cyclops. And we know that in the live action version, he is a little bit more left to the imagination, I would say. And
yeah.
so, yeah, what do you think of that, of Cyclops in this iteration, but also in the past iteration?
There's so many anime iterations of Cyclops, but this one is the most iconic and my favorite actually
Mm,
of all of them. Though, especially like you mentioned before, like how he did a landing without the parachute at all and just uses Autobot to do a landing and everything. That's very iconic right there.
right.
So this is what I like this version of Cyclops. It's very more level-headed, cool, and then always very quick on his feet and everything.
Hmm.
The other iterations and the animated versions of Cyclops were nothing compared to this one.
I think
So
part of it is probably because he's now thrust into leadership. We see in
yeah,
the first episode, he's the one who's leading the X-Men now because of Xavier's death. He feels added responsibility being the dad of the X-Men, but also in some ways trying to evolve in a short amount of time. We also see in not this episode, but in the next episode, Rogue's storyline evolving as well. We can see first signs she still have this love-hate relationship with Gambit. And then in the second episode, it was, oh, what's this all about? It was jarring for me because I remember that there was that between Nito and Rogue, but I was like, oh, wasn't he with Gambit? It's pretty established there. So, what do you think of that, though?
I'm familiar. This was known before in the comics, especially
Mm-hmm.
that there was a relationship between Magneto and Rogue in one of the universes, not the main universe, but there was one comic book storyline that Magneto and Rogue has a relationship. But now when they put that aspect into this series, I'm thinking like, whoa, there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, it's really surprising.
Mm-hmm.
There will be more plot twists later on that you'll find out. So I'm really curious how they're gonna handle this,
Mm-hmm.
though.
Yeah. And so this was one of the shots from the trailer, and you can see the whole team together. You know, he says to me, my X-Men. And you can see there's some changes of the look of the X-Men Definitely Gambit is much more buff on this one than I remembered. And Storm with her mohawk, which was featured in the last season of the original series. And then also Morph as well, as considered as non-binary.
Futurist.
It's very interesting to hear what the online view of that is. My personal take is that, hey, things change. Accept it or not, up to you. You don't have to watch it, actually, if you don't like it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also Bishop's hair is different because
Right.
it's a short cut now. Then it used to have like a, what's the word called?
Jerry curl. He had a Jerry
Um,
curl. Oh,
yeah,
he
that.
had a rat tail now.
Yeah, rat tail. Yeah.
Yeah. So another one of the main storylines. This is the B storyline in the first episode where Jean Grey is pregnant and is deciding whether or not they want to leave the X-Men and raise their child, and then not having that responsibility of being superheroes. So this is a very touching moment. We'll see another touching moment later on with Jean Grey. They did a very good job of not having her be the damsel in distress. She definitely has agency of being a very significant contributor to the team, and not just this person, oh, I fainted. That was very prevalent in the original series. It was interesting to see that change in the first two episodes here. Storm also has a big thing that happens. What do you think is going to happen with Storm? Because there was a big twist near the end of the second episode with her.
I did not expect that because Storm is one of my favorite characters in this series,
Mm-hmm.
and to see like, what happened to her, I'm just like, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
But I really hope the writers is gonna do something good for her because I'll be really pissed if they write her off or sideline her the whole series because I'm like, this is not Storm unless there's a big reason why. My guess is probably to do a rediscovering journey for herself and then maybe eventually get her powers back
Yeah.
in some way.
Yeah.
Despite that, the news that she found out that the effects are permanent when she was shot by some anti-X gene ray that will reduce the powers off or get rid of it off the human of the gene.
Right.
So we just have to see what happens. But I'm like still surprised and makes me wonder, come on, show us already what's gonna happen to her.
I think
So
they showed a lot of her powers in the first episode, so you wondered, oh, she's at her peak. She's really going after it, and then you're like, oh crap. Now I know why they did that to her. And they mentioned how she was an Omega level mutant. I was like, are they trying to depower her? I'm like, oh crap, then they did. But I think that they're gonna have her powers back. There's just no way. Like you said, David, sideline her. That's just not cool. In terms of leaders, if Scott and Jean were to leave, she would be de facto leader. There's just no doubt
she
about it.
would be, because technically in the comics throughout the years, that Cyclops was technically the team leader and Rogue is second in command, basically.
Exactly.
That's what she's known for and everything. Of course, there are other comics that Storm has her own X-Men team, the same as Cyclops, and the same as Wolverine. But in this series in particular, Cyclops was the leader and Storm was the second in command.
Right. So they found out from Gyrick where Trask was hiding the new Master Mold. So they had that fight in the desert, but now they're facing these zombie sentinels. This was also very iconic with Gambit and Wolverine combining their powers. Get another screenshot of the team together trying to fight against the sentinels. And they did end up defeating the sentinels. Trask ended up being arrested by the UN. I think it was a UN Security Council, the government entity of these two episodes. And then this is also a very iconic scene because this was ripped straight from the comics with the basketball scrimmage that they have. And then they find out that there was an intruder that came into the X Mansion and found out that Magneto was the one that paid an unexpected visit, and then telling them that everything that Charles owns now belongs to him. This was in the trailer, so it wasn't that much of a shock. But when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, it's like that, huh? And then you can definitely fear the rumblings as to what's happening with that reveal. David, how did you feel about it when you saw it in the trailer about Magneto?
The first thing I was thinking about is what the because how he became the leader of the X-Men, and then makes me wonder why did David's will sent to Magneto? I was thought that Cyclops will be automatically inherited the whole foundation and
Mm-hmm.
everything, or Storm at least as well. But Magneto? I was like, uh-oh. I hope that Charlie Xavier has a very good reason why. We do know the history that before the Brotherhood and also the X-Men, Magneto and Charles Xavier were good friends, and they created the school together
Right.
until there was some fallout that they both had different philosophies
Yep.
about how mutants should live amongst the humans.
Mm-hmm.
And Magneto, he even trying to explain to the X-Men of why he came to the institution and why he happened to have Xavier's will. From the sound of his voice, he's obligated
Mm-hmm.
to fulfill his wish because there was a couple times that he's coexistence with humans. He cringed when he mentioned that C word.
But he also feels, like you said, an obligation to Charles and extending his legacy, even though he's dead right now. And so you can see that the X-Men are not very trustworthy, especially Cyclops. Cyclops is like, WTF? But then also I have a baby on the way, but James, this might be a good idea because now that we can be off on our own and raise our child, Magneto can be the one who take over. But Scott's more skeptical and say, hey, we need to stay on because we don't know really what he's doing. And so a lot of the X-Men feel very uncertain throughout the second episode. He's trying to build bridges. He's trying to do what's right by Xavier. By the end of the episode, you don't know what his intentions are, but at least you definitely see some type of evolution that has happened with Magneto throughout the episode. And then toward the end of the second episode, which reminded me a lot of January 6th. And it was just so crazy how they just ripped from the headlines their own insurrection against the powers that be. And so Magneto brought all of the people that were in that chamber, the judges, and also one of the other human protagonists, Dr. Cooper, to space and basically try to explain to them that, hey, we are just insignificant specks in the universe. Maybe we should learn to coexist in this world. You can definitely see that type of evolution, progression, maybe even say maturity from Magneto. And shortly thereafterwards, he got pardoned because he was standing on trial for all of his past crimes from the original series. What do you think about this part here, David? Do you think he's really trying to turn a new leaf or not?
I'm not sure, but before I do, let me give the audience a callback. In case everyone's wondering, the costume that he's wearing right now is a callback to the 14, the Uncanny X-Men comic book from the Trial of Magneto story arc.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that the writers picked that up and put it in here because he was put on trial in front of you. And also, did anyone notice who Dr. Cooper was voiced by? It's voiced by the original Jean Grey voice actress, Catherine Disher.
Okay.
Because Jean Grey in this series right now has been voiced by Jennifer Hale.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's very interesting.
So
definitely
that's
nice tidbit there.
Back on point here.
Mm-hmm.
I say that's very monumental because everyone's wondering, Magneto somehow became a hero all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden he got pardoned so easily. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking, what's going on here? Because the UN has a reputation of being really stern of the sentencing and questioning.
Exactly.
They try to make Magneto saying, I am trying to change in a more forceful manner. He doesn't want to, but the thing is, he was attacked by the Friends of Humanity. They shot one of the weapons they used that was meant for Magneto, but Storm came in to intervene the shot, but ended up losing her powers.
Exactly.
So, and then Magneto is saying, we're not your enemy. The true enemy is yourselves because they thought mutants are to blame. Mm-hmm. Magneto wants to point out that there are great mutants out here. You just need to accept it, as well as you need to accept that humans aren't as peaceful, and the Friends of Humanity are the example how bad humans can be.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think that was definitely a very great speech that he had, and honestly, it led to his pardon, and definitely it's some effectiveness there. Also, the mutant island of Genosha is going to apply for UN recognition. I think that's another major step in terms of mutant and human relations. They see both Cyclops and Magneto sees it on TV, and you think everything's hunky-dory, and then there's this big thing at the end that happens. Another knock on the door at the end of episode 2. Something else turned up, that there was another Jean Grey that was looking for Scott, and I was like, what's going on here? David, do you want to shed some light on that?
For all the viewers who are confused, let's backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
During the UN trial of Magneto, everything, before he was given his pardon, Scott and Jean gave birth to the baby.
Right.
And it's also revealed the name of the baby. It's Nathaniel Charles Summers, which, if anyone who are big X-Men fans should know what that name is, it belongs to Cable.
Right. Yep.
We've seen Cable before in the original series. Maybe we might see him again. But in what iteration, though? Because currently in the comic books, we've seen older man Cable and then a younger Cable
Right.
in the comics. But it's likely to be the older Cable there. We saw the twist, basically, that there's another Jean Grey came to the door.
Mm-hmm.
And then I actually knew of this. So I was like wondering which Jean Grey is which, because one of them is the real Jean Grey,
Right.
but we don't know what the writers and the creators of this series, what direction they're gonna go with. There was a few revelations came in besides another Jean Grey. We saw a glimpse that there was an attraction between Magneto and Rogue
Mm-hmm.
in there. And when did this happen in the original series? Did or maybe it just happened during the time period between Xavier's death in this series, right? We saw Gambit knew about. I don't know what the direction would be, but I can tell you this: since there's two Jean Greys, one of the Jean Greys is actually Madame Prior,
Mm-hmm.
who is a clone of Jean Grey.
So if you talk about clones, you're probably going to start talking about Mr. Sinister, that he's going to come back sometime in these episodes. There was this obsession with Sinister, like obsessing over Cyclops and Jean Grey's genes and their birth line. He might feature there, and also it might tie into Morph as well in the future. And we saw that in the intro. There's definitely some more things to drop, and I think that hopefully we can get some reveals here. So this is just the first 2 episodes of this larger number of seasons. I think that they're doing pretty well, and hopefully it continues, right? Any final thoughts on X-Men 97, the first 2 episodes?
It's only 2 episodes in, so I'm really curious how it's including the drops of revelations.
Okay.
But I'm very excited to see it back, and the series still got the same charm. So I'm very curious to see the next 8 episodes this season.
All right. So if you like our conversation about X-Men, or please like, share, and subscribe for more content like this, and we will be back with more reviews of X-Men 97. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.